Welcome to the University of Kentucky's Backyard Streams program. During this webinar, we will explore the topic of permitting as it relates to stream restoration and stream bank stabilization projects. We will also cover federal and state permitting requirements, as well as local ones you may encounter. In 1948, Congress established the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. This act was the first major law to address water pollution in the U.S. And while this act was a step in the right direction, a number of environmental problems as seen by the Cuyahoga River, which was one of the most polluted rivers in the country, still existed. Located in Cleveland, Ohio, the Cuyahoga River caught fire 13 times since 1868, the most notorious being the fire of 1969. Because of this fire, Congress passed a number of laws in the 1970s, including the act to establish the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In 1972, Congress passed the Clean Water Act, which was an amendment of the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. The Clean Water Act was designed to regulate the discharge of pollutants, namely from point sources, into waters of the United States. The goal of the act was to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of waters of the U.S. so that they met their designated uses of swimming, drinking, and/or fishing. The 1972 amendments covered 6 major items. First, the Clean Water Act established the basic structure for regulating pollutant discharges into waters of the U.S. Second, it gave the EPA regulatory authority over the implementation of pollution control programs. Third, it required the continuation of existing requirements to set water quality standards for surface waters. Fourth, it made unpermitted discharges into waters of the U.S. unlawful. Fifth, it funded the construction of sewage treatment plants through a grant program. And sixth, it established the need for planning to address non-point source pollution. The 2 sections most relevant to stream bank stabilization and stream restoration projects are sections 401 and 404. Section 404 covers the discharge of dredged or fill materials into waters of the U.S. The basic premise of Section 404 permitted activities is that no practical alternative exists that are less damaging to aquatic resources. Or if significant damage would occur, then such activities should not be permitted. Thus, the permitting process promotes the avoidance and minimization of impacts. For impacts that cannot be avoided, mitigation is required. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act is administered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who runs the day-to-day operations and issues permits related to Section 404 activities. Oversight of the Army Corps of Engineers Section 404 program is provided by the EPA. Typically, the Corps views homeowner stream enhancement and stream bank stabilization projects as good for water resources. Section 401 covers the impacts of discharges on quality of waters of the U.S. Section 401 provides for the protection of the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of these waters. It allows states, tribes, and the EPA to address water quality impacts resulting from federally approved permits. Thus, state and tribe water quality standards, which may be more stringent than federal ones, cannot be violated by federally permitted activities. In Kentucky, Section 401 of the Clean Water Act is administered by the Kentucky Division of Water. First, let's examine the federal permitting process more closely. As part of the permitting process, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers requires the completion of the Approved Jurisdictional Determination or JD form. The purpose of this form is to help the Corps of Engineers determine if the project will impact jurisdictional waters of the U.S. and thus require a permit. Jurisdictional waters of the U.S. include traditional navigable waters as well as those waters, either tributaries or wetlands, with a significant nexus or significant connection, whether hydrologic or ecologic, to navigable waters. Non-jurisdictional waters do not require a permit from the Corps of Engineers. Depending on the type of project, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will issue either a nationwide permit or an individual permit. Nationwide permits are more general permits authorizing activities that have minimal adverse impacts on the environment. Currently, there are 54 nationwide permits. If your project does not meet the general terms of a nationwide permit or requires mitigation to compensate impacts to streams and/or wetlands, then an individual permit is required. Individual permits are commonly associated with activities that pose a larger disturbance and/or those that impact higher resource waters, such as cold aquatic habitat, outstanding state resource waters, reference-reach streams, and the like. The big advantage of a nationwide permit is related to the amount of paperwork and speed at which the permit is issued. Nationwide permits require much less paperwork and are typically issued within 3 months, as opposed to individual permits whose authorization can take a year or more depending on the project. If your project will participate in a stream mitigation program or bank, then a mitigation plan is required. With mitigation, stream or wetland enhancement or restoration activities are done to compensate for physical impacts to aquatic resources. The goal with mitigation is to replace habitat resources impacted by permitted activities. Mitigated related restoration projects require a higher level of monitoring and reporting. Because urban streams are prone to flashy hydrology and poor water quality, the likelihood of a mitigation project occurring in an urban landscape is low. There are 2 nationwide permits of importance for stream bank stabilization and restoration projects. The first is a nationwide 27 permit, which authorizes aquatic habitat restoration, establishment, and enhancement activities. This nationwide permit covers the majority of stream restoration activities. The second is a nationwide 13 permit, which authorizes stream bank stabilization. A nationwide 13 differs from a nationwide 27 in that the work is occurring above the ordinary high water mark, meaning bankful elevation. It also means that channel realignment will not occur. If your project involves working only along the stream bank, meaning equipment will not enter the stream, a nationwide 13 permit would likely be appropriate. In addition to federal permitting, states have their own permitting requirements. States have oversight over the federal program covering Section 404 of the Clean Water Act through permit requirements related to Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. In Kentucky, the Kentucky Division of Water must issue a 401 water quality certification for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit to be valid. In addition to the 401 water quality certification, 2 additional permits are required: permit to construct across or along a stream and Kentucky Pollutant Discharge Elimination System General Stormwater Permit. The permit to construct across or along a stream is for floodplain management, and as such, your application must receive approval from the local floodplain coordinator before it will be reviewed by the state. The goal of the permit is largely to ensure that your project will not increase flooding upstream or downstream of the project. Lastly, if your project is large enough, the state requires that you obtain a Kentucky Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or KPDES, General Stormwater Permit. Stream permits may require engineering or survey data. This certified information should be provided by the applicant when completing the state permit applications. Review and authorization of Section 404 permits at the state level is done through the Water Quality Certification Permit. The goal of the permit is to minimize impacts of discharging dredged or fill materials on the quality of Kentucky's waters. Much of the information used to complete the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Section 404 permit can be used to complete the paperwork for the Section 401 Water Quality Certification Permit and the permit to construct across and along a stream. In Kentucky, both state permits use the same application except when an individual water quality certification is needed. If such is the case, then an additional form must be completed. Unlike the federal permit applications for a 404 permit, The water quality certification and permit to construct across or along a stream permits require completion by a licensed professional engineer unless the Kentucky Division of Water grants a waiver. Additionally, this permit application requires the signature of the local floodplain coordinator before the Kentucky Division of Water will review it. The Kentucky Division of Water regulates any development along or across the stream with a drainage area of 1 square mile or greater. Examples of such activities include bridges, culverts, stream restoration projects, placement of fill material, and buildings. The permit to construct across or along a stream is the floodplain management portion of the permitting process. This permit is required for all activities that occur within the 100-year floodplain. Because streams and floodplains are interconnected, this permit is combined into one form with the water quality certification permit. With the permit to construct across or along a stream, it is important to demonstrate that your project will not adversely impact adjacent property owners by causing upstream or downstream flooding. The Kentucky Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or KPDES, General Stormwater Permit focuses on how you will manage stormwater from your project site such that it does not negatively impact water quality. A KPDES General Stormwater Permit is required if your project will disturb 1 acre or more of land. Sediment is one of the largest pollutants, especially during construction activities, so it is important that you address how to prevent the transport of sediment into streams while the project is under construction through the development of a stormwater pollution prevention plan. You must also complete a notice of intent electronically at least 1 week before the commencement of construction activities. Once federal and state permits are obtained, a local permit must be obtained from the floodplain coordinator in your community. It's important to note that the local floodplain coordinator may be the sole job of one individual or could be one part of an individual's job, depending on the community. Some communities may have higher standards for flood protection than federal and state guidelines specify. If you are in Lexington, an LFUCG land disturbance permit, erosion sediment control plan is required. The erosion sediment control plan is a stormwater prevention plan that is part of the KDPES General Stormwater Permit. Before the LFUCG land disturbance permit can be issued, a representative from LFUCG must visit the site to review your sediment and erosion control measures. Another example is LFUCG's riparian buffer permit. This permit is for property owners who desire to create a buffer area around streams, wetlands, ponds, or the like. It is issued by LFUCG's Division of Environmental Services. Once you have received any needed permits, it is very important that you read the conditions or terms of the permits to ensure you are in compliance at all times. If you have any questions, it is important to clarify those before you begin construction. If changes are needed to the project during construction, be sure to notify the agencies who issued the permits. One common condition of permits is a pre-construction notification. Notify all involved agencies of the intended construction start date. Typically, written notification is given 2 weeks prior to the start of construction. Such notification provides agency personnel with the opportunity to come visit the project through the construction phase if desired. Finally, be sure to keep a copy of all permits on site in a waterproof container in case a representative from one of the permitting agencies visits the project site and would like to see the paperwork. In summary, when planning a project involving streams and riparian areas, it is important to be aware of and obtain any necessary permits. As the permitting process is complicated, it is best to start locally. Local representatives, such as your community's floodplain coordinator, can help you navigate the permitting process at all levels. When conducting stream bank stabilization and/or enhancement projects, permits at the federal, state, and local levels may be needed. Thank you for completing this webinar on permitting. To learn about permitting as it relates to backyard streams, check out the publications and additional information sections. For additional information on backyard streams, visit www.uky.edu/BAE/backyard streams.